Can I look forward and think we're in a position where I can see us expanding to 20 or 30 people? I wish I could. That would be nice. But I think in order to do that, the industry needs to contract. Good talent needs to become available. Companies like mine who have the resources to be able to take on good talent need to actually spend the money to do that. We have to be able to reinvest back into people and the industry. So the move forward is contraction and then standards, guidelines, ethics, and then business growth. I think with a little more power, a little bit more respect, a little bit more in terms of buying power, we then get a seat at the corporate table in between other creative companies.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to welcome a good friend of mine, Aaron Kaufman, the president and CEO of Fifth Element Group. You know, he's a leader in the live experience and experiential design industry based here in Toronto. And Aaron is widely recognized for his strategic approach in creating impactful events. But moreover, and I say this with as much love and respect as I possibly can, I like to regard Aaron as the industry's biggest asshole. And again, Aaron, I say that with as much love and respect as possible. I won't go into too much of this massive bio, but you're an award winner. You have been in the industry forever and a day, and held leadership roles in industry associations, run a successful company. So I really wanted to get on this podcast so that we could have a really open and frank discussion about the events industry and where it is, where it's falling down, where it needs to mature, and what we think we should do as an industry to improve the market. So Aaron, welcome to the show, and really great to have you.
One hell of an introduction. Let's go.
Yeah, thanks. So we did actually write a script for this, but Aaron and I had a conversation just before we started recording, and we're like, this seems like a very promotional thing. We want to have a really frank and open discussion. And so, to kick things off, Aaron, why don't you tell people just a little bit about your background in case they're one of the 5 people who hang out on LinkedIn who don't know who you are.
Sure. So I guess I've been around the industry right around 25 years. Fifth Element Group is going to be 21 years old, which man, time flies when you're having fun. I gather I've gained a reputation. I personally don't like to look at as asshole, but rather maybe innovator, influencer. I like to use some more interesting and positive terms. However, I do really appreciate the idea that over the years, I've had the opportunity to have some impact in the industry, hopefully more positive than negative. But I think, an industry predicated on hugs and not handshakes needs some people to kind of move it forward. And I like to think that I'm part of that small group of people in the industry who are willing to speak out to hopefully help future generations. And so when I get to do all the work that I get to do and the great clients I get to work with, and you talk about awards and all these other things, which are, have some meaning, but generally meaningless. I think for me, being known as, a bit of a rebellious leader in the industry, or, a trendsetter or a shit disturber, or all of these things, I think for me, that's, something that I wear with a badge of honor, knowing that generally in my daily life, I have a big heart and I treat people well, and I believe in doing things the right way. And so, ultimately for me, I don't mind that persona so much. And, from there, I hope going forward, we're finding ways to change and grow and develop a better industry for people who are going to come behind us, because we didn't get the benefit of that from the fossils who are retiring these days.
Yeah, I kind of think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, if that's the right way of putting a metaphor or personifying it. Yeah, if you are passionate about something and you see something that needs to be vocalized, you put yourself out there. You are never afraid to call bullshit on something that you see. And, we can certainly get into things about how we manage awards, as you just sort of mentioned, awards, what's the meaning behind it? There was an interesting post, I think you and I were chatting about 2 months ago, where somebody sort of said, hey, what's with these awards and what do they actually mean? And it started a really interesting conversation with, well, how do we fix awards and how do we actually show recognition? And what does that recognition actually mean? Which I'm sure we can get into. So let's just start the conversation with sort of an examination. As you said, you've been in business for 21 years. Both of us have 20, 25 years doing the business in one form or another. I like to talk about how when I came into this industry, it wasn't an industry. It was an off the corner of your desk kind of thing.
It's still
There,
not an industry. Let's
See, this is why I love you, because you're like, no, bullshit right there. Like, it's not an industry. I happen to disagree with you a little bit. I think it's not industry in the sense or to the scale of some of the customers that we work with, which are big tech companies, big pharma, all of those kind of things. Those are like full-fledged, they have a seat at Congress kind of industries. I agree that we are nowhere near that level yet. I do see a trajectory where we get there.
Oh, you
And
do.
so, oh yeah, yeah,
That's nice.
absolutely. That's a great response. So then why do you not see it ever? Like, do you see it not ever happening, or do you just think we're not there yet and stop claiming that we are?
Here's the truth, right? So, my good friend and mentor, who was the founder of the International Special Event Society, he said to me a couple of years ago that actually the organization of events has taken a step backwards and has now become a vocation. And we sat down and talked a little bit about it, and the determination for me was really that you have large organizations and associations, and I won't get into individuals or whatever else, but you have the Event Industry Council, who then governs all the associations and whatever else. And the challenge is that in order to be a real industry, you need to have certain things: standards, a code of ethics, an overseeing body, some way to to govern an industry. And the other part of that is that clients or prospective customers need to understand what they are getting, how they should be, or what they should be paying for, standardization in terms of rates, and understanding the basic foundation and minimums that an industry company should have. And we don't have any of that. And so one of the things, I was talking to someone actually earlier today, and we equated the event. We'll call it an industry for the sake of your podcast. Okay. So we have the event industry, and we equated it very much to the construction industry, right? Whereby there's really no standard or ethics. And every time you have a construction guy come in, oh, the price isn't real. And he's going to say, well, the cost of lumber went up 20%, and your fridge was stuck in the Suez Canal for 7 months. And we missed the deadline because, I went to the rental company for my excavator, but they didn't have it. And so I had to go somewhere else, and I had to wait a week, but really he was just on another job site. And, all of these things happen. And so, really for us, what's really missing is that a client doesn't have a general expectation of the way the business runs, and vice versa. We are not visible when you mention corporations. Why don't we get a seat at the table with the marketing company, the PR company, and the advertising company? And the reason is because we don't promote strategy. So we are just doers, right? Like a construction company, whereby someone else, a professional, needs to come in, call it an architect, call it, whatever you need in that particular circumstance. They need to come in and create plans, which then go to whoever to get approved, right? And then the construction guy can come in and go, I can read these plans. I'll build you that fireplace. And so we are, generally speaking, looked at as a group of people who have no real standards, no code of ethics. It doesn't mean we don't act ethically. It means that from a client perspective, they don't have a basis by which to understand what we do, how we charge for it. And so those are major missing pieces for me in terms of changing from a vocation to an industry. The other thing I would say is that we end up in a position where as company owners, and you're a company owner just like me, right? We hire people, and 6 months later, they think they can do it themselves. They go sit in the corner of their parents' basement, right? They start an Instagram account and they use their cell phone number, and really, they're claiming to be able to do the same things as us. And what are they doing? Well, they're driving the prices down, and they're doing all of these things, right? So for me, in order to become an industry, the other major missing piece is that contraction has to exist. There needs to be merger, there needs to be acquisition, and in some areas of the industry, there has been. But when you talk about production or planning, producing, all of those things, you have no North Star to look at and say, these are the companies that are doing these things. There was a merger or an acquisition in Canada. It was talked about for about 15 minutes. Congratulations to the companies. I like them both. They both do good work. But, big deal. It happened. They moved on, right? And there was no real play for this is the big name change. This is that. Today in the news, though, when you look at advertising, I'm reading a ton about Publicis buying Leo Burnett. Leo Burnett now is just going to be called Leo, or the joint organization. The owner of Leo Burnett made a speech years ago about what happens when you take half his name off the door. And there's now a whole story around it. Unfortunately, there's conversation about people losing jobs and all sorts of other things, but that's business, and that's the way things go.
So I'm going to jump on that for a second because, funnily enough, I saw that acquisition as a sign of the continued maturity of the business. That, look, I generally agree with you that we're not, forgive this expression, but we're not a big boy industry yet, right? Not in the same way that like Publicis buying Leo Burnett and that sort of like that marketing agency, strategy agency sort of stratosphere. They also started 50, 60 years ago, and it took them that much time to get to that place where they're playing the same sort of equity value proposition that big pharma or big tech. Big tech is ridiculous because it's time to maturity as a industry vertical started 30 years ago and now accelerates that. You can go into, some valley in California and say, I got this great big idea. Then you've got a $40 million valuation overnight. Private equity comes in, buys all the stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, now you're on your daily talk on business news. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
When I asked someone this morning, the same phone call that I asked this morning, and I said, so what do you think of when you think of events? And I got, well, I think of Franck from Father of the Bride or Jennifer Lopez from The Wedding Planner. We're a fucking joke, right? People don't understand. People are not willing to pay the value that we're worth for our experience and our skills and the foundation of our business. And that makes an industry. I can go to an ad company or marketing company and they say hourly, our ACD is this much, our this person is this much. If someone said to you, well, what is the basis by which you charge for a producer in the industry? You could ask 50 different companies and get 50 different answers. Now, would they all be between certain numbers? Sure. Is there a basis or a study or some data or anything else which says, here as a customer, here's what you can expect to pay, here's what you should be paying here for, here's what you should be looking for? There isn't. And so when I sit with someone and I say, well, what do you think of when you think of my industry? And they say, Franck from Father of the Bride, right? I love Martin Short. I think he's an amazing comedian. But is that what people think of when they go, oh, we got to call an event planner or a producer? Is that what they're thinking in their office? I'm hiring Franck from Father of the Bride?
So look, I think that market perception, first of all, it's market perception and you and I have had many a discussion in the past where I think that the role of our industry associations is to counter that, not to say, hey, we're going to give you negotiate a deal for 20% off UPS services. Who cares, right? As my industry association, whether or not that's, the MPIs of the world or the ILEAs or the PCMA or whatever it is, your job should be going out to the market and saying, we are not Franck. That's stop trying to tell me about creative process. I have creative process. That's how I run a business. And I will counter the fact that I again, I see progress, not perfection, and I think that that's a key business perspective that everybody should have. It's one of the reasons why, yes, you are absolutely right that maybe one day I'm going to tick off somebody in my office, and they're going to go, "I can do this better than Matthew," and they're going to go to their basement at their parents' house and put out a shingle, right? That is absolutely possible, but the difference is that I have a business perspective. I look at, and so when you say you can't tell me what the value of X is, this is the maturing of the industry, right? That I think that yes, we are getting better at that. And so yes, I can tell just generally speaking by looking at somebody's website, by understanding, like doing a little bit of surface research, what their valuation is, what their profitability is, all of the business metrics that one is supposed to. I've been preaching this for years, and I think you and I have talked about it at industry conferences where I walk around saying, there's nothing special about your special event business. It still has to get customers, get revenue, balance books, do marketing, operational efficiency, all of these things. What's different now from when we first met 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah, probably
maybe?
15.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was that nobody was having that conversation 10 or 15 years ago. But we are all having that. I think
Oh,
most of us
listen.
are having that
Hold on.
conversation now.
So here's what I'll say to you. That's just bullshit lip service, right? That's people throwing around. Event people love to feel important, even though they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. So we have, we have had lots of great conversations, and the one thing that I appreciate most about you is that you are able to give me a run for my money, both in rebutting a lot of my opinions, which I appreciate, and also bringing forward really excellent points about things that I may not consider. But I can tell you one thing for sure. We are so busy using buzz phrases, sustainability, DE&I, how do we do this? How do we do that? How do we do this? How do we accommodate these people? Blah, blah, blah. And nobody talks about how the fuck do we make more money? And so we're talking about doing all of these things, but who's talking about what that costs? So, I can tell you that in my office, we have a ton of ideas when we pitch and propose and do all these things about, how do we accommodate this? How do we accommodate that? We're working with a different community. We do a lot of work with the Indigenous community in Canada. I love that stuff. We get to learn a lot. We have to accommodate different things. That's all great, but we still need to make money while we're doing it. And those people understand that. But I can tell you in the past 12 months, we've had two proposals completely ripped off and produced by other companies. So they were incumbent companies that we bid against on a job, and the company we bid to shared our proposal, and it got completely ripped off. So now if I'm a real industry and a real company, what do I do? Right? I'm going to call a lawyer, and I'm going to go and try and recoup the money that's lost from all of our work, right? That being said, can I fight a major international company, or do I want to? I don't know.
Well, I'll give you some legal advice. You're not fighting, XYZ brand. You're fighting the person who produced your work.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Right.
But and on that point, I had a great conversation with, oh God, what's her name from a Sustainable Events Forum. And I brought that up. I was like, well, if somebody steals your work and you can prove it, go to a lawyer and sue them. And she looked at me like I was crazy a little bit because, and all respect to Natalie, I have enormous respect for what she's doing. But, she kind of looked at me crazy and said, well, you can't do that. I was like, well, why not? Like if I were if I were some marketing agency A, right? And we pitched this idea to Coke, and then Coke turned around and gave it to one of their people to say, Matthew pitched this. Why don't you guys do it? And then I found out that would be on MSNBC tonight. I would be like, I called a lawyer, and you're going to give me 1.6% of all your global sales because of that. Right. And so, I'm not saying that the only measure of a real industry is that you are allowed, you have a valid way to sue somebody. But to your point about the business is about making money. And that was always my point with there's nothing special about your special events business, is that it's really great that you love the work that you do. And you certainly should have passion and want to get up in the morning and do it every day. I love my job. I love, figuring out problems. It's great. I would rather do that than anything else. But I am a business. I am here to make money. I am here to increase value in an ethically and moral way, and and above board and transparent and all those kind of things. Those are choices that I make on how to position my business, not because anybody told me to do it. But you're right. Like there's a portion of this industry, and I think it's still the majority that says, yeah, but like this is my craft and my love, so I feel bad. And one of the best lines I've ever read in like some business leadership book, I can't even remember whose it was like, priests make money, right? They get a salary every year, right? And they negotiate that salary and they get benefits and all of these things. So what makes you special about that, right? Like it's not dirty. It's not like, yeah, don't be Elon Musk and try to own the entire world and influence elections. Probably not a cool thing. But like charge what you're worth, look at the industry, be professional, all of those things. So I'm ranting a bit.
Yeah, but for me, when I'll give you a great example. When COVID first started, and we're going to go back a few years, but I wrote a really what I thought was a really well written, well thought out post for the industry, because I tend to be somebody who I think is on top of some of these things. And I said, look, this is going to be a real challenge because no industry businesses had the foresight to make sure they had enough capital to get through, any major issue, right? So at the time COVID was just starting, I predicted right away, this isn't going to be gone in 2 or 3 months, right? Unfortunately, I was correct in there. I had wished I wasn't, but I had also said this is going to cost a lot of people jobs, a lot of people businesses, a lot of people are going to leave the industry, all of these things. People better figure out a way to sock away money and do whatever when times are good. And I can tell you that I had one person in particular, two people, one very well-known industry person and one Canadian media person, okay, in the event industry, write me. One said a whole bunch of things about they hope that I lose my business while it's happening, and they hope that I fail. And the other one called me an anti-eventist and told me what an asshole I was. So, I mean, it's not the first time I was called an asshole, so I can accept that, right? But every other industry, every other business everywhere talked about the repercussions of COVID on their industry. When I said, hey, listen, this is not going to be short term. You can't just pivot out to something else. That's not the way business works. If you can, you're not a real industry, right? If you can pivot from one business to another business. Yes, people had to eventually learn digital. You had to go to producers such as yourself who were far more skilled in digital and production options than say I am. Yes, there were ways to find ways to make money. But for us, for example, we engaged our clients on strategy. So you still have a brand to roll out. You still have a product to roll out. You have a lot of fundraising to do. How do we use an experiential option to do that? And we started charging for time rather than projects, right?
Yeah, I used to hate the term pivot because to your point, and I think that was the secret of our secret sauce or the secret to our success in that period was that we didn't, very similar to you, where we realized that our expertise was in the production side and how to make a production look a certain way. And so whether or not that's on Zoom or full TV broadcast or a live event, that's essentially what our service was. So we didn't pivot. We just reframed things and remarketed. And I'm sure that's similar to what you guys did.
Absolutely. And I think, my point in saying that is that imagine that that's a real business comment. And you talked about things being on MSNBC and all these other things. I just made a post on LinkedIn for the benefit of some people who might be scared and reading saying, hey, listen, this is real. And you need to understand that these are some of the repercussions, and money is going to be a challenge, and you're going to lose money today and tomorrow and the next day. And you're not going to do an event in 2 months. And I got hate mail from industry veterans. I got blocked on LinkedIn. I was told off and, completely, kind of alienated by a really small, unimportant group of people. But, at the end of the day, for me, imagine that. And I can tell you that there is representation on major Canadian boards who are representing the industry who were a part of that. And so, what does that tell me? Well, it tells me that those people are in vanity roles, not really doing shit because they're too afraid to speak up for the industry and give real opinions on real issues so that we can make real money doing real jobs.
Okay, so then let's shift the conversation into where it's going, right? So we've sort of said, here are a couple of the gripes. I do want to sort of jump back on at one point at some point. So where it's been, now where it's going, right? What are the sort of things you had mentioned or brought up, the acquisition or the merger that just happened between two relatively large-ish for the Canadian market event agencies. I had mentioned that I saw that as a sign. Oh, that's a sign of maturity. Do you see that as a sign of maturity? Do you see a lot more of that happening in the next couple of years?
So I'll start by saying I think it's a sound business decision, but maturity, no. And the reason being is I don't know the circumstances behind that. I think everyone involved are good people, good event people, good business people. I think it's a smart decision. I think it'll turn out to be a good decision for them. But when I look at maturity, I look at expansion and growth in terms of what we offer the consumer. So, does that merger acquisition offer more? Does it upskill your company, so to speak? I don't know. I don't believe so. I think it expands your reach, right? Which is obviously smart. But I think there are a number of ways to do that. So, do I think that acquisition offers new services, new products, innovation? No, I think it expands reach, and that's a good it's a good sound business decision, right? If I wanted to have a presence in Vancouver, I have two options. I can buy a company or I can hire two or three people and make my investment a little bit more of a slow burn, see what happens. Where I see the maturity lacking is that no one wants to change the business practice and no one wants to change the offering. And so, in order to mature for me, we need a seat at the table strategically in between marketing, advertising, PR at that table so that we're not underneath those people. And in order to do that, we have to be strategically aware that we have to be adding marketing, digital marketing, PR, or whatever other services that would suit our company to expand our offerings. That's something event people don't do because they're too afraid of the unknown. So they're too afraid to hire someone that knows more about a particular area of business because they're not real business people, right? And so I think that at the end of the day, what you have is in this deal, you have expansion through geographic location, but I don't see maturation in our industry because our business owners are too afraid to hire people in different areas who know things that they don't, because all of a sudden the vanity of being the owner or the top dog or the president or whatever else goes away, right? And most people in our industry have their name on the door. A lot of the older people who are phasing out now had their name on the door. And, for me, I think it's something that if I had the opportunity to hire a president for Fifth Element Group who could do a better job than I can, 100%. I've talked about it before. I'll continue to talk about it. I'll continue to look at it. If I was going to look for a merger acquisition, I would look for something out of somebody who can both add additional services to my company and take over as president.
It's interesting that you say that because I will agree with you that the vanity metric that you're talking about, especially on the production side, I found is very prevalent. Right. I remember there was a rumor that some big AV production company here in Canada, this is pre-pandemic, was sort of poking around the industry saying, hey, I think like the owners were like, hey, I think I want to sell. And the asking price that they came back with was so ridiculous because it comes from this vanity metric. And this is true of any industry or any practice, or, whether you're a set of plumbers or a set of architects or marketing firms or event services firms. There is I put, 20 years into this and I bought that gear on the shelf for $40 million over 20 years. It's like, okay, yeah, but it's only worth $1 million now. What I found interesting about that merger, and I think you're right, it didn't add anything new. It wasn't like this is a merger of two great leaders that are who all thought alike, and we're gonna like build something great. Like maybe they'll announce that in a month. Like we're not privy to it, but that vanity metric, that was to me a first sign potentially that it's not a vanity metric. It's not, and I'll take the dig about the name on the door. I'm just very uncreative with calling companies anything, so I named it after my last name. But to me, it was a sign that there is potentially like, oh, I know what the valuation of that company was, and I know what the valuation and the structure and the leadership structure of that was. I'm curious as to who moved where and where that's going to settle down. I've seen a lot of acquisitions in my time, and they can go great or they can go not so great, especially in the personality thing. But what I'm going to say is that we got approached to acquire a company a couple of years ago, and it was a vanity. I want to get out. I want to get all the money I invested over 30 years in this business. I'm like, no, that's just not going to happen. And when I asked them for things like due diligence, paperwork, when I asked them for transparency and all of that, like all of a sudden they went radio silent because that's to me a sign of an immature industry. If I was NVIDIA and I went to some chip designer out of Utah and said, I'm really interested in buying your company in a nice way and not super aggressive. And I said to them, hey, I'd like your financials and due diligence for the last 3 years. They'd go, yeah, absolutely. We have them prepared. They're right here. There's a standard on how we do business. I don't think that exists in this industry. I think even if you were wanting to expand through, like, because as you said, there's two strategies. You either expand through acquisition or you expand through blood, sweat, and tears and development, right? God bless you if you have either of those two strategies in your back pocket. But what in both of those things in this industry, I think what happens is either a vanity thing, like, oh, but it's like, I like being in charge and my own boss and so on and so on. The idea of like succession planning or some kind of exit strategy, nobody has it in this industry. Like we've seen people die in their job.
Here's what I would say, right? So I think to the most basic point of this is that when you look at a tech company or any sort of kind of company that tends to go through mergers and acquisitions. Tech is the easiest one, but there are tons of them. Products obviously get bought out by bigger companies all the time. There is always in an industry a standard again, right? So what factor of EBITDA do you have to be between? And so those things can work themselves out because if a particular industry says, well, generally speaking, the purchase price is 7x, right? Then okay, you might have to offer 8, maybe you get away with 6.5 plus some shares, but there is a basis and a foundation by which you can start the conversation, right? If you're willing to offer 2 and the standard is 6, you're not going to buy the company without doing something like a crazy amount of shares or what I mean. But in our industry, there's no shares, right? So that goes out the window. And I couldn't tell you, I mean, there could be, but generally speaking, like I also couldn't tell you is there a standard?
Just for the listeners, just in case they don't know, so earnings before income taxes, annuities, et cetera, et cetera. And every industry and every vertical has a different multiplier for standard. And, if you're in tech right now and you invent a massive, like, I don't know, you're in AI chips or something, your multiplier is probably 10, 12x, right? Like that. And that's the highest end of valuations. In our industry, and I've done the research, is usually 2.3 to 3.4 x of EBITDA. Right. So that's a general rule of thumb. If you really desperately want to buy the company, offer them 6 times EBITDA, whatever you want. Those are business choices for people to make. What I want to get down to in this is, to me, the maturity is that people are starting to ask and understand what EBITDA is, what conversion rates mean, like what market, like all of these sort of business standards. The standards we use as an industry are common business practice. And you would be surprised, and well, you wouldn't be surprised, but the listener may be surprised that only 5 to 10% of the industry actually follows, measures, or even knows about those particular business metrics. Especially over the last 5 years, with so many people sort of like the great resignation and all that, and everybody sort of went to their mom's basement and started their own company and everything like that. And I keep on scratching my head at that and going like, I mean, I get it. You didn't want to work for a shitty boss. You didn't want to work for the man anymore. And your solution was, I'm going to become an independent and I'm going to desaturate the market. And I'm like, that is a really dumb choice. But that's my personal opinion. Like, you follow your dream. So that's where I see the whole, that's my positive outlook on this, is that, when I see an acquisition like that, when I actually think, and I've been hearing rumors throughout the industry, that there are some major-ish acquisitions and mergers going to start happening in 2025, because the valuation of the industry has risen. A, on the backs of inflation. B, on the shortage of skilled and competent labor. Shortages still exist across the market for things. And so when those three things happen in any industry, whether or not you're in, lawn seed or, chipsets or whatever, they tend to economically lead to people looking at an industry and going, that might actually make me some money. What I think is going to hamper that is what we've been talking about, that there's a good, and I'm going to be conservative about this, let's call it 60% of the industry that is still mom and pop, off the side of my desk. This is a vocation and I'm not building a business, right? And so I think that's the only thing that's going to really slow that down, right? Because even private equity is now going after industries like, no, not just, well, they did that 10 years ago, and that's why real estate prices have gone up. But mom and pop plumbers, service companies, they're buying them all up and they're consolidating them into a brand and then raising the price 300%, and that's how they're going to make their money back. I think that the only thing stopping that from that happening to our industry, and you getting a knock on the door from Blackstone and saying, hey, we're doing a strategy planning conglomerate and we want you to be part of it. The only thing that's stopping it is that the other 5 sitting next to you are like Jim Smith, who does events, right?
Well, I think the other challenge is, again, going back to the start of our conversation, is that the client doesn't know how to buy us, right? And in terms, not buy our companies, but buy our services. And so ultimately, when you talk to any of these private equity firms and whatever else, the real challenge comes in whereby when we bid on jobs, you have an 80% is your experience, your foundation, your project management skills, blah, 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 where you can get 80 out of 80. The last 20 points is your budget, right? And so the challenge is getting 80 out of 80 and then getting 10 out of 20 because you're the most expensive. And recently we've lost 2 jobs in my office because of this. Simply the answer was, well, you're the most qualified, but we had no choice but to take the lowest bid. Well, had you said that originally, we probably either wouldn't have bid or whatever else. I think the problem with private equity coming in is that they recognize that there are too many people still capable of driving the market down, and they can't make that 300% increase, even if they swallow up, 5-10% of the industry. And so ultimately the buyer doesn't know what they're paying for. They just are often still looking at us as franc and we want the lowest price. And so I think we're too far away from maturation to have that happen. I think some industry people can certainly move some pieces around, but I think we're way too far away from a lot of private equity looking at companies like mine confidently and saying, we're going to build this conglomerate in the same example that you use for plumbers.
Yeah, true enough. That being said, I don't know if that is a net good thing, right? Like, do we want as an industry to become an acquirable commodity that can be leveraged for growth like that? And that there are some people, and I agree with them, that like the backbone of our economy are these small service providers. And, I'm not trying to equate it completely to us, but like, let's take plumbers. Like, the backbone of the economy is some guy who says, I know how to do plumbing and I'm a really nice guy. So he has a successful, profitable business, provides for his family. This is a good thing for our economy. Having gigantic private equity come in and buy them all up and just drive up the price, that's not a great thing for our economy. Great for investors, not for the economy. But so as we sort of move into the last sort of section here, I want to talk about what do you think the industry needs to get to that ideal place? Like you've talked about ethics and standards, you've talked about perhaps some economic education. What are those things that you sort of see as the goals to achieve for us to grow into a more mature industry?
I mean, sadly, I think contraction is a big one. The industry diluted itself and expanded in ways that no industry could. And again, I'm using this industry term really loosely for your benefit. And so, I think ultimately contraction. And so, I think there are obviously a number of things. One of my flags in the ground is we need ethics and standards, and we need a way to be able to educate clients on what they're looking for, because companies like yours and mine have to be able to grow. And as is the case with a lot of the companies in Canada and the US, you get to a certain level, a certain, both in revenue and staff, right? We have 10 staff here. By all accounts, that's a decent sized team for our industry. And so, can I look forward and think where I can see us expanding to 20 or 30 people? I wish I could. That would be nice. But I think in order to do that, the industry needs to contract. Good talent needs to become available, right? Companies like mine who have the resources to be able to take on good talent need to actually spend the money to do that. So it can't be, well, I own my company, I'd rather, keep my money in the bank. We have to be able to reinvest back into people and the industry. And so, we end up now growing businesses. So the move forward, both from a maturation perspective and from a revenue or business perspective, is contraction, and then standards, guidelines, ethics, and then business growth. I think with a little more power, a little bit more respect, a little bit more in terms of buying power as well, money in the bank, we then get a seat at the corporate table in between other creative companies. And I'll tell you what, this has happened to these other industries. Marketing specifically, they were marketing companies, and then, internet came, and then you found internet marketing companies. But really, internet marketing companies don't exist anymore. Why? Because the marketing companies realized those companies started to contract. There was really good talent around. So they built their own marketing company inside of another marketing company that specifically focuses on digital. And now it's just their digital arm, right? And so we kind of need that same thing. We need the ability to be able to say, the industry contracted, good people are around. I'm going to now hire 2 or 3 people, and we're going to do this. We're going to do that. I'd like to hire someone who understands the marketing and ad world a little better, so that when we have that seat at the table, we're all speaking the same language. But that has to happen with a lot of contraction and a lot of change, and then the ability to kind of be able to say to clients, look, you don't want to give your marketing company $100,000 for an event, because they're going to eat up $40,000 right off the top. Then they're going to call me and they're going to go, hey, listen, this is the theme we already pitched. It's circus. The client really likes it, right? And then I'm going to take 20% of the remaining $60,000. And now the end client's expecting a $100,000 event for $48,000, right? And I'm using arbitrary numbers, but though that can never get us a seat at the table.
My thought on that is that it has always got to be from what you offer the market, right? So it's really easy to sit and look at an industry or a vertical, or however, or vocation, if you want to call it that. I'll service you in that sentence. So if a buyer comes to the market and says, okay, I got a choice of 10 possible places where I can stick my money to get this thing accomplished, right? And they reach out to all 10, and one of them says, this is how we work. This is the standard. This is they need some guidance into what they do. And so one company says, I'm going to guide you. I'm going to tell you how this market works, how what the value is to your insight. Like, yeah, I mean, you could go to like a marketing, like a Leo Burnett. Not to, I don't know anybody there, but you could go to Leo Burnett and spend $1 million with them. But really, what's happening is they're taking 40 points off of it, and 600K is coming to us to actually produce your event. And so let me help you understand that so that you can make an informed decision to say, oh, screw it. Like I need Leo to go and do my marketing global brand strategy, and, figure out how to sell Coke, in China. Right. Cool. Off you go. But to do my annual general meeting, I need you, and I'm going to give you $1 million to do it. So like, there's some market dictation, like capitalist market dictates the value. So as a buyer, they go to the market, they see these 10 people, maybe half of them say that, and the other half are like, oh, I'll do it for whatever money you want, or whatever it is. And so the capitalism dictates that those other 5 will eventually either disappear or be eaten by the 5 that actually have the maturity.
Well, but here's the problem. So our industry applauds those other 5 people. And our industry loves those other 5 people. And our industry invites them to all of the associations. And that's who the associations are made up of. And our associations don't want those people to go away. So while common sense dictates that, yes, eventually those people should ultimately get eliminated, they won't, because our industry and associations puts those people on a pedestal as brave people who really stepped out and blah 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 blah, right? And that exact reason is why companies can't grow, companies can't get bigger, people splinter off on their own, and they continue to find ways to make enough money to make themselves happy, and don't force any big companies to bring on a company like mine or yours for a seat at the table on a permanent basis, on a agency of record 3-year agreement, so that I can forecast my business, because our associations and everyone else applauds these people who are fracturing our industry.
I agree. And so then my follow-up question to you was, in part of this, how do we set those standards? Whose responsibility do you think it is? Do you think other than it's everybody's, which, buy into to the thing. Do you think that, and you and I have been very vocal about this, having served on boards of associations in the same association many times, you and I have a very similar complaint, which is, like, it's really cool that this is a hugs, not handshakes kind of organization, but like, who's setting an ethical standard? Who is advocating for the industry? Who is, and as you said, why are you celebrating these 5 mom and pop, I do everything by the seat of my pants, and not advocating and or investing intellectually in those 5 real businesses? And why can't you tell the difference? And so my question then becomes, what do we have to do to change that? Is that like you and I need to like aggressively go in and take over the boards and dictate stuff, or is it?
I think there has to be some sort of barrier to entry to start, right? So any real industry anywhere, in order to start a business, you need some sort of capital, right? So a lot of times when I'm on a stage and people call me out on this and they go, "Oh, you're full of shit," blah blah blah. I said, listen, my basis is really simple. If we create an environment by which there needs to be a capital expense to starting a business in this industry, right? Then all of a sudden, someone can't quit their job on a Friday and open an event agency on a Monday morning. And so the simplest way that I could put it is, and I don't have to tell you, for example, what an annual insurance policy costs for your business, right? Whatever your investment in that is, I know it's substantial, as is mine. And so what if we just went out and clients understood that in order to hire a reputable event agency, now whether it's production more on your side or management, production design, whatever you need to facilitate your job, if there was a basic foundation by which clients understood, I'm going to ask for a $5 million per occurrence liability insurance policy in order to know I'm hiring a professional. which other industries do, right? You have to be bonded, you have to have an insurance policy, all these things. So I'm not saying anything crazy. Then all of a sudden, anyone who wants to open their business, if they were forced to buy a proper insurance policy for their business and for their business practice, well, right away they need $20,000 or $30,000 for the year to invest. How many, you tell me, how many people that have worked for an event planning company, I hate the term event planning, but for an event planning company who leave their job on a Friday, have $30,000 in the bank to go buy an insurance policy, never mind anything else to start?
100%. Look, I agree with you on that point that, somebody once asked me a couple of years ago, some industry conference, hey, what should I do to start my own business? I said, okay, well, first of all, go get some money in your bank. Second of all, get a lawyer and put them on retainer and get them to work on building all of your little bits of paperwork. Get an accountant to set up your books, get insurance. Those were like my big four, right? Like, I don't care what you want to do. You want to sell chairs and linens? Go ahead. You want to do audiovisual? Audiovisual has a lot more liability and replacement costs and all of that kind of stuff. As a sign of maturity, again, always trying to be on the positive end of this, is that, I remember a day I was working for a big, super audiovisual company, and they had a policy, and it was a good policy. It was like, anybody we rent to has to have replacement insurance and liability. And I remember calling like the big client who was, lording it about, like, oh yeah, I'm going to give you all this business. It's going to be millions of dollars in your bank account. You rub my bank, I'm going to rub yours. I'm like, okay, great. And so we put together a proposal and a quote, and we said, okay, it's like a $100,000 show, and we're going to need, proof of insurance, and you're going to have to sign a contract. And the literal shitstorm that started of like, how dare you? My other vendor would never ask me for this, and so on. I was like, okay, then we're never doing business with you, because how can you not have insurance? Or why is this a big deal? To this day, I still have people who are like, oh, I got to ask you for your insurance. I'm like, of course I have insurance. Do you think I'm 5?
Here's what our industry has allowed for now. Okay. So nobody has real permanent insurance. So the industry made up this thing through the associations, because the associations got involved, where they go, well, now you can buy your day of insurance, right? So what kind of bullshit is this? So now, once again, we're finding the lowest possible price, the lowest possible denominator by which to operate businesses. And I can tell you, a few years ago, I had the highest rated session at CaterSource and the special event. And I called out a very famous wedding planner for totally fucking over a couple. No insurance, overcharging, not getting approvals on budgets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To the point that someone in the session actually ratted me out. And I got a note from her office saying, you can never do that again. This is unacceptable, blah, 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 blah. And I said to her, let's get on a podcast and debate it. I never heard back again, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've all run into that. Like, I've run into this a couple of times where like, oh my God, I can't believe that you said that. It was like, well, was none of it true? Like you want to sue me for libel, go right ahead. But I have the thing where you were proud of this.
Oh, I had a copy of the lawsuit in U.S. federal court from the client. So I knew exactly what she was being sued for. And so it's crazy to me. And so when we talk about the maturation of the industry, every time I think we're going to take a bit of a step forward, we find a way to lower the bar even more. So now we can buy day of, right? For $200, you can buy insurance for the day of, right? Well, come on.
So that's the insurance industry trying to capitalize on it. Like, sure, I'll take you $200 for absolutely nothing.
My point is that if, as an industry, the associations or the event industry council or someone else got together and said, look, I want to educate our clients that if you're going to hire a professional company, then these are the things you need to ask for and look for. And then let it be the wild, wild west. And big companies will put into their policies that in order to bid, you have to show this, 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 and this. And if you don't have it, you can't bid. And to walk into their office to pitch an idea, they're going to say, do you have this, 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 and this? And maybe more companies will have a pre-approved vendor list, whether I'm on it or not, right? Maybe they say once every 3 years, we're going to put it out to tender the same way marketing and ad agencies do. And you have to stay on the list. You have to show you still have this, this, and this. You have to show 3 case studies from the last 5 years, which have this and this, and that you did this. You have to show that you're not being sued by 10 people, all of those things. I think at that point, now we start talking about maturation. At the same time, we start talking about contraction, because guess what? All these mom and pop little people who are sitting in their basement, they can't show those. They don't have case studies and evidence of work over the past 5 years. They don't have a track record of having the last 5 years of insurance. And so they can start, they can buy insurance, they can do all these things, but they don't get a sniff at the same jobs than I do, right? Because I've earned that position.
Do you think that that starts in the market, or do you think at the association level? Do you think that it's the big call is to reform the associations, or is it industry education?
Here's the thing, right? If you look at any other association, right? My wife is an accountant. So every year she has to get, points or whatever in continuing education. But more importantly, she has to pay to recertify every year, every 2 years, whatever it is, right? And they say, okay, we're going to look into your business or whatever else. I'm not saying we need to do that. But when you look at the Canadian Accounting Association or whatever else, right? They have certain ethics and standards by which you have to follow in order to continue to be certified. Now, we're not going to talk about certification because that's a whole other podcast. But I do think in our case, there is a very easy way for the associations and the Event Industry Council to agree that we're just going to put out a release for accredited companies or for people to be able to send their clients saying, here, this is what the Event Industry Council recommends, even if it's a recommendation. This is what the Event Industry Council and signed off by MPI, ILEA, PCMA, Canadian Society of Association Executives, at 50 members, it doesn't really matter, right? I'd sign off on it saying, here's what designates a professional company from a hobbyist. It's okay to be a hobbyist, but there's no way that a hobbyist should be able to access the same type of revenue opportunities, clients, etc., just by providing the lowest price. And if they did that, then as soon as governments went to tender and stuff like that, the government tenders are public tenders. They don't ever say usually like, do you meet the minimum to be considered a professional organization under the Event Industry Council rules? And I have seen other industries RFPs and they all say that. So therein lies our challenge towards maturation, which we continue to go back on, right? Where every time I say there has to be this piece put into place, I think we're moving towards there, but why are we stopping short of saying, here is what makes a professional organization? Here is what you need to look for, or here is the basic standards by which we are prepared to say this company is legit. And I'll tell you what, if I had to pay $100 a year to the EIC and submit my paperwork just to be located in Toronto, does work across North America, right? Certified to do work, insured to do work in the US on premise. I have an IATA number, right? So again, that would be there to say, can book flights, can book accommodations, all of those basic things. I would pay that. I pay 200, 300, whatever it is, because that now gives my experience and my organization a competitive advantage that we certainly don't have right now. It also puts me on a list of people that, again, becomes professional. And as such, that is the next step to maturation. So if somebody did want to come buy my company, that's an asset to me. I'm not just an event planning company with a certain revenue, but I now have these things in place that make me more valuable, that provide me with more opportunities to bid or do bigger business or whatever else.
Cool. Unfortunately, Aaron, I got to cut the conversation off there because we were going a little bit over time. And yes, we could talk for
Sure.
5 or 6 episodes, which
Absolutely.
might be an idea.
Sure.
So thank you very much for joining us, Aaron. And of course, to our listeners, if you want access to more of this kind of content, early access to this episode, or some deep dives on the subjects we talk about, go to productionvaluematters.com and subscribe there. Thanks, Aaron. It was great speaking with you.
I appreciate you having me, and anyone can find me on LinkedIn anytime. So please feel free to reach out with questions and comments. Just don't leave shit in my DMs, please, if I don't want to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
Production Value Matters, the business event podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To find out more about Byrne Production Services and how putting on events can drive value for your business, visit byrneproductionservices.com. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Production Value Matters, thank you so much for listening.